Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Hope everyone's having a lovely day and that you've had a marvelous evening as well. We're going to be talking about a couple of different things today, but they're all going to kind of tie together. First of all, we've got a clip from Methods. A.G. Barr was on a radio program, and he was talking about there being no problem with having indictments come out before an election. I think it's a very telling bit of information. We listened to it on Quarantine today, but we're going to talk about it today too, because I think it's so important everybody should see it. Also, we've got a new report from John Solomon. He has gotten a 2019 letter from Adam Schiff, which was sent to the that time DNI Dan Coates, talking about how he was not too happy about the potential declassification that we waited a very long time for. And this gives some reasoning why Adam Schiff would not want that to happen. Tying in with that, some ex-FBI officials have admitted that the former president actually drove the push to include the Steele dossier in that intelligence community assessment on Russian interference. In addition to that, we've got new emails from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which suggest that the former president also knew that No Name planned to leak the phony Russia dossier. That's from Judicial Watch. And then we've got a thread by Undercover Huber, which details some interesting bits of information in regards to how the mainstream media is now publicizing this new intel report, which has been released by Richard Burr. They leave out some information in regards to how it was presented to the public. Comey wanted it in, obviously the former president wanted it in, and there is quite a bit of it that's redacted. So the way that they are pushing it on America right now is a bit disingenuous. Also, we've got a thread from Paul Thurber. My buddy Monty sent it over. We're going to be talking about some information from that movie I Pet Goat 2. It's going to tie into what's taking place today. And then we've got another follow-up thread from Paul also discussing I Pet Goat 2, which is going to be a refresh on the information contained here in this new thread from today. So please, everyone, do sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. Panic is highly contagious, especially in situations when nothing is known and everything is in flux. Well, the world we live in today is in flux, and it's filled with a flood of information that's often as much gossip as fact. Now, that makes it hard to know what the situation really is, and it also makes it easy for people to panic and make bad decisions. The only way not to get caught up in that chaos is to have a plan allowing you to avoid dealing with empty store shelves, long lines, and in the worst case, desperate people. Use today to prepare. A great place to start is storing food in your home, and I'm prepared myself, and I even ordered more recently. Now, the experts at My Patriot Supply have told me that orders have now reached about 100 times the normal volume, and they're shipping on a first-come, first-served basis. With this unprecedented emergency, orders are being delayed, sometimes 8 weeks or more. I urge you to add your order to mine today, because the sooner you order, the sooner you can get your purchase. Take action so you're ready for what's coming and save $70 on a 2-week emergency food kit when you go to my special website, preparewithredpill78.com. Those that know what's coming are preparing today. Go to preparewithredpill78.com. Once again, that's preparewithredpill78.com. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. First of all, today we have this tweet from my good friend Methods. He says, A.G. Barr says he's not against there being indictments before an election. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Issues. The investigation of U.S. Attorney John Durham into the circumstances surrounding the surveillance of President Trump's campaign, transition, and early administration, does that investigation remain on track, undisturbed by the virus?
Yes.
There are guidelines concerning the announcement of indictments or the closing of investigations prior to the election. When is that deadline for U.S. Attorney Durham, and do you think he will make it either to disclose indictments or to disclose that the investigation is over?
As far as I'm aware, none of the key people whose actions are being reviewed at this point by Durham are running for president.
But would not the announcement of indictments after a time certain have an impact on an election of the sort that the U.S. Attorney's Manual recommends against?
Well, what is the sort that that the manual recommends against?
As I recall, this came up with Director Comey making his announcement and the concerns in 2016 that he had acted improvidently during the run-up to the election. I don't recall what the exact timing is.
Yeah, well, that was directly as to a candidate.
Oh, so it would not matter in your view if there's an investigation and the day before the election someone is indicted?
Well, I think, in its core, the idea is you don't go after candidates. You don't indict candidates or perhaps someone that's sufficiently close to a candidate that it's essentially the same, within a certain number of days before an election. But, as I say, I don't think any of the people whose actions are under review by Durham fall into that category.
All right, so nobody under review by Durham falls into the category of being sufficiently close to a candidate to be considered unindictable. So that means in the lead up, the people that we're hoping are going to be indicted, it would be no stretch of the imagination to assume that any of the people we've been discussing openly could be indicted in the very near future because we are well before an election and because they are not the ones who are actually running. Now, perhaps the people that are sufficiently close to a candidate, like I would say the son Hunter or the candidate himself, Uncle Joe, they would need to be indicted in the days after an election. But any of the other people like Comey, Brennan, Strzok-Page, Rice, Yates, any of those people could easily be indicted prior to. But I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that because Bill Barr weighing in on this whole timeline thing and the fact the election is coming up, it doesn't mean that these people are immune to getting in trouble. All right, and coming up next, I'm sure everyone remembers the hassles we went through to try to get the Declas to take place. C before D, Coates before Declas. We got rid of Coates. Now the Declas is starting to actually take place. Well, it wasn't just Coates that was standing in the way. John Solomon has gotten his hands on a 2019 letter that Adam Schiff sent to DNI Dan Coates at that time, and it reveals how he secretly hid dozens of transcripts in Renegade's Spygate scandal. Now, this letter has come out, and it refers to transcripts in question pertaining to the Russia collusion investigation. Now, back in September of 2019, the GOP was still leading the House. We had bipartisan support, and they voted to make the transcripts of 53 witnesses in the bogus Russia probe public. Now, 19 months later, the transcripts are still hidden, and even though the U.S. intelligence has declassified and cleared them for release, we have not seen them all yet. Now, the reason being, Adam Schiff has been the one specifically who has kept dozens of these transcripts hidden with backroom dealings in the ODNI. Now, Schiff got to work immediately hiding those transcripts because the Democrats took over the House in the 2018 midterms, and then he took over as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Now, according to John Solomon, those transcripts contain exculpatory evidence for President Trump's team, and Adam Schiff demanded that they be kept from President Trump and the White House lawyers so that they couldn't see the information and get it put out to the public. Now, John Solomon said that shortly after Schiff took over from Representative Devin Nunes as chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, or the HPSI, in 2019, he sent a letter to then DNI Dan Coates. Now, the letter states, as quoted by Adam Schiff, "Under no circumstances shall ODNI or any other element of the intelligence community share any HPSI transcripts with the White House, President Trump, or any persons associated with the White House or the President. Such transcripts remain the sole property of HPSI and were transmitted to the ODNI for the limited purpose of enabling a classification review by IC elements and the Department of Justice." Now, what's really ironic here is that they were transmitted for this review. They were reviewed, and it was deemed that they should be released, but they never got released. Now, U.S. intelligence officials have told Solomon that Schiff's demand made it impossible for them to declassify 10 specific transcripts from the White House and national security witnesses, because the White House counsel would have to then look at them to know what's in them and look at it for presidential privilege. Now, 43 of the transcripts were in fact declassified and given permission to be publicly released, but even those have still not come out. The Dozens of transcripts are currently with Adam Schiff, and they're in hiding despite the committee's vote to release them to the public. And committee Republicans are also in the dark about the ODNI's review of those transcripts. Now, Schiff's alarm bells went off back in March of 2019 when it was stated that the ODNI staff and President Trump's lawyers at the White House would need to go and look at all of those transcripts in order to have them released to the public, and Schiff did not like that idea. Republicans had hoped that the witnesses' testimony would be released before the 2018 election so the Americans could see all the problems with the Russia probe and any investigation that had taken place up until that point. And then, of course, they would know about the false narratives that had been foisted upon the public. However, that never happened, and the declassification efforts kept dragging on even to this day. Now, when the Democrats took over the House, there was absolutely no possible way that they were going to see the light of day because Schiff is in charge of the HIPC. Now, it begs the question, what exactly is in those transcripts? If we know already that it's exculpatory information, the truth of the matter is it would just make the Democrats and all of their do-nothing investigations look completely unnecessary. So, of course, Schiff doesn't want them to get out to the public. Hopefully, before the election in November, perhaps we can get some movement at the current DNI, Rich Grenell. We can have these transcripts moved out into the public domain, and people who don't understand what a liar and a cheat Adam Schiff is right now are going to be able to get that information and then make up their own minds come November. Because President Trump and his team never did anything wrong. The exculpatory information is meant to be released because it proves the case for the Republicans as to why the investigations into President Trump were absolutely unnecessary and ridiculous. But for the Democrats, they need that information to remain hidden because they still want additional investigations to begin any day now, specifically in regards to the handling of the CV-19 situation. Thank you very much to John Solomon for getting this information, and I look forward to the coming days when perhaps we might finally get this historic Declas to the American public. And speaking of information which might be contained in those transcripts, some ex-FBI officials have come out of the woodwork to let us know that the former president was actually driving the push to include the Steele dossier in the report on Russian interference. So perhaps some of that testimony is in regards to this. Now, these former FBI officials point squarely at former President B.O. in regards to the push to get this Steele dossier included in that intelligence community assessment on the 2016 presidential campaign. The revelations were contained in the heavily redacted 158-page bipartisan report that the Senate Intelligence Committee released on Tuesday, which apparently backs up the 2017 intelligence assessment, which included the FBI, the NSA, and the clowns in America in regards to that 2016 Russian meddling. But it also contained in the mostly redacted information details about the effort by the FBI's leadership to use Christopher Steele's unproven allegations in that Russian interference assessment. The revelations are especially relevant days after declassified footnotes have been released by the Justice Department, which suggested that the FBI received ample warning in 2016 and 2017 about the possibility that the information contained in Christopher Steele's assessment came from Russian intelligence services, which by its very nature compromises the work that Steele was doing and probably makes it a Kremlin disinformation campaign. Now, although officials stressed that Christopher Steele's research was not used as a basis for the 2017 Russian meddling assessment, at least some of that dossier's claims made its way into the still classified report. Now, the Senate report that was released revealed the IC assessment began at the behest of Barry himself in early December 2016 in a meeting with the National Security Council, which included instructing then DNI James Clapper to prepare the comprehensive report on Russian interference. The report stated Barry himself directed that the report include everything the intelligence community knew about Russian interference in the 2016 election, which de facto means include that Christopher Steele information. James Clapper told the committee, "I don't think we would have mounted the effort we did, to be honest, in the absence of presidential direction, because that kind of cleared the way on sharing all access." The Senate reported that Barry asked for the intelligence assessment to cover a wide range of Russia-related topics and to be completed by the end of his second term in late late January 2017, which means that he wanted it completed before he left office and before President Trump and his administration came in, which would probably have put an end to the whole issue at that time. It was important for the disinformation and propaganda that was going to be pushed on the American public that intelligence community assessment was completed before the end of his second term. Now, the committee found that the information Steele gave to the FBI was not used in the body of the ICA. However, a summary of this material was included in Annex A as a compromise to the FBI's insistence that the information was responsive to the presidential tasking, which is exactly what the summary says is classified. We can't actually read what the president specifically said. The Senate investigators also found that so-called Annex A includes qualifiers for the Steele material, but it never mentions the private clients who paid for Steele's work, which we now know was the DNC and Hillary Clinton and her campaign. Now, I'm sure that everyone is aware that after Inspector General Michael Horowitz's report came out, we learned of the 17 significant errors and omissions. We learned of the dirty dealings with the FISA court, and we learned that there was no basis for the Steele dossier to be included because it was all disinformation. And we all learned of the significant part that Fusion GPS had to play at the behest of the DNC and the Perkins Coie law firm. Now, next, we're going to go over a tweet thread from Undercover Huber, which details all of the things that are being left out of the mainstream reporting on this new intelligence assessment, which was released by Senator Richard Burr. Now, the mainstream narrative and the narrative that's being portrayed by this new report that Burr and the people on the committee released is that no matter what, Russia had a part to play in meddling in the election. They just leave out the fact that it was actually Russia helping Christopher Steele, who was helping DNC, who was helping Clinton, who was helping Perkins Coie. They completely forget to mention that fact. Now, he starts out, I noticed that none of the blue ticks quoting the Senate Intel report have mentioned Comey being quoted about the Steele dossier. Comey had said, I insisted that we bring it to the party. Or that the only version of the ICA that included the dossier was the most highly classified version that went directly to President Barry O. Or that the ICA makes zero reference to Russian disinformation as a potential risk to the Steele dossier, despite the FBI having that information at the time. Or that the ICA Annex A, where a portion of the dossier is summarized, does not mention the private clients who paid for Steele's work, despite multiple people within the DOJ and FBI knowing, and most likely other agencies did as well. They also don't mention that the two-page summary of the dossier in Annex A, which is supposedly not even an IC product or classified itself, has still never been released so we can see what was actually presented to Barry and POTUS-elect Donald Trump. They also forget to mention that the two-page annex of the dossier is supposedly not even a part of the ICA, but those are the two exact pages that were supposed to be privately briefed to President Trump, except James Comey just told Trump about the Moscow ladies of the evening instead. They also forget to mention that Bill Priestap told Congress under oath that, quote, the FBI didn't want to stand behind it, the dossier, on April 13th, 2017. Plus, a week earlier, the FBI had stood behind the dossier allegations in the third FISA request on Carter Page, and it would even get a fourth FISA in June. They also forget to mention that the report can't even get basic facts right, saying that Crossfire Hurricane was officially opened on July 30th, 2016. It was actually July 31st. Did anyone fact-check this thing? Also notice that nobody is clamoring for the fully unredacted version of this report, like with Mueller, or accusing Burr of a cover-up, like with Barr. This report is 70 to 80% redactions, easily. No facts or intel about Putin's so-called preference for Trump is unredacted. Zero. Now, Huber continues, haven't seen this quoted either. The National Intelligence Officer for Russia in the Clowns in America testified, we didn't have any evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. There was not information that pointed us in that direction. In fact, collusion is never even discussed by the ICA. All right, and it ends there. Quite a bit of errors and omissions in this new report, and it is very convenient for the mainstream media to just stand behind the narrative that Russia had a part to play in meddling in our election. They just forget to tell you that they meddled on behalf of the Clintons. So in addition to all of this new information that's come to light, we've also got some more information from some emails between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. And this also is in reference to the dossier. Basically, it shows that the former president's FBI was well aware who it was that leaked this dossier when they did it, and they just chose to sit on that information. Now, Judicial Watch figured this all out. They obtained 138 pages of emails between Strzok and Page, and it suggested what I just stated. No Name was going to leak this dossier, and everybody knew about it. Now, remember back in January of 2017, BuzzFeed published the original version of the phony dossier, and that Peter Strzok had actually said it was identical to what No Name's office had given to the FBI. Now, in an email on that same date, January 10th, Peter Strzok wrote an email that was entitled, "Regarding BuzzFeed publishes some of the reports." And he said, "Our internet system is blocking the site. I have the PDF via iPhone, but it's 25.6 megabytes. Comparing now, the set is only identical to what No Name had, and it has differences from what was given to us by Korn and Simpson." Now, the Korn in question is David Korn, the reporter from Mother Jones. And in those emails, Strzok goes on to further mock President Trump, and this was just a few weeks before he was inaugurated. Now, the emails also revealed that Strzok had communicated with then Deputy Director Andrew McCabe about the leak investigation tied to that Clinton Foundation, the very leak in which McCabe was later implicated. Now, No Name previously admitted that he gave this dossier to the FBI, but he denied being the source for BuzzFeed. But because we have this email from Peter Strzok, we can see that it actually was the exact same one, and No Name is the one who gave it out. Now, court files unsealed last year revealed that No Name and his associate David Kramer were actually responsible for sharing that phony dossier with media outlets. So this is just backing up everything we already know. And it also shows us that the FBI was well aware of it before it all came out. These new emails show that Strzok and his former FBI colleagues knew almost immediately that No Name was the one who leaked this infamous dossier. The emails also show that senior FBI officials had contempt for President Trump and gossiped about its counterintelligence briefings to him. Now, the FBI under James Comey and Andrew McCabe was a train wreck, and given the ongoing cover-up of these docs, the agency hasn't improved much. That's a quote from Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch. And unfortunately, I have to agree with him. Up until this point, we've gotten very little reassurance that anything has changed or is going to change. But I just want to remind everyone that, as I often say, the wheels of justice turn slowly, especially when they are turning legally. So hopefully in the very near future, we're going to see something come of this, because people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page would be perfect names to put in those first 6 placeholders. All right, and next we've got this tweet thread from Paul Ferber. I'm sure that everyone is well aware of the film I Pet Goat 2. It seemed to predict many things that happened over the course of the years. And now Paul thinks that he may have identified another seemingly precognitive bit of information from it. He says, normally when the people that we're fighting do something significant, I go back and watch their roadmap of what they've planned for us to see if there was a coded warning of what was coming. And he links to the video itself. Now, remember when Notre Dame caught fire this time last year, I spotted a possible reference in the movie, and I think I found another one. Now, here is the actual image of the spire collapsing, and then here is the portion from I Pet Goat 2 where the spire is collapsing as well, and I'm sure everyone remembers they are oddly similar. He says between 5:29 and 5:45, a figure called the Keeper of the Flame by the animators dances around near a flame while imprisoned at the top of the tower. He wears Native American masks that change in rapid succession, and one of them is a plague doctor's mask. Wait, what? The Keeper of the Flame goes through these representative masks: anger, war, plague, tension, and finally relief as a blinding light shines from above and his mask disappears even though he's still imprisoned. I've often wondered what this sequence was all about. Now I suspect it's a timeline of the major events they've had planned: global tension, limited war, a plague, ceasefire, more tension, and finally global war. They were going to release a plague this year before the CV-19 mishap. And then he goes into another thread which details some of the information he did a decode on sometime back in the day when it first originally was released, about 2 years ago. So I'm going to leave a link to this thread, and I'm also going to leave a link to his original thread, and you guys can check it out if you haven't seen it before, and tell me what you think about it. And finally, this is something that's very interesting. The D.C. police are still actively investigating the allegations against Uncle Joe. Right here is a picture of Tara Reade, who made the claims, and this man needs no introduction. Now, this was reported by the Washington Examiner, and if you'll recall, Tara Reade accused her former boss, who was then a senator, of a very despicable act back in 1993. Now, last month, The Intercept first published a shocking story about the allegations against the senator from 1993. And Miss Reade also filed a complaint in the early 90s, but she was retaliated against and silenced by the left-wing mob when she came forward with her story. Now, the allegations which she's made are well past the statute of limitations, but what is very curious is that the D.C. police are still actively investigating. They specifically stated this is an active ongoing investigation and there are no further details to provide at this time. They continue, cases that are handled by the Metropolitan Police Department's assault unit are going through a multi-review prior to being assigned to a disposition. This case is progressing through the review process. I'm sure that everyone is well aware of the direct claims that Tara Reade made, and I'm sure everyone is also aware of Uncle Joe's denial that it ever happened. But a couple of weeks ago, when Tara Reade filed this formal criminal complaint against Uncle Joe, she stated she has no plans to sue him, and the fact that the D.C. police are actually looking into it gives me a lot of hope. Even though it's past the statute of limitations, this is one of those things that they could make a decision to perhaps go and do a moratorium on. It's not unheard of. It's something that they've done in the past, which has allowed people who were victims of things such as this to actually get the justice they deserve. So this is definitely something we want to keep an eye on. Well, guys, it looks to me like there is a steady drip, drip, drip of information, and something tells me it is going to turn into a flood before very long. We've gotten quite a bit of confirmation on very, very important things that we've been talking about for a long time, things that we have been waiting to be released. The last thing I'm waiting to see now is the full declassification and release of those documents, and I have a lot of hope that acting DNI Rich Grinnell is going to do something about it, especially considering his attitude towards Adam Schiff. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank everyone for joining me. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, one more thing. It's Red Pill. I just want to say thank you once again to everybody that has helped to support the channel. If you'd like to get involved, you can go ahead and check the show notes in the pinned comment and the description. There's always good information in there. I've got a couple of backup channels. I ask that you go ahead and subscribe to them because if anything does happen here, I will start publishing there. And if you want things like merchandise or anything else, there is a bunch of information that you can find right below this video. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.